Good morning, and welcome to the morning from the New York Times. It's Saturday, August 8, 2026. I'm your host, and we've got a packed edition today, from a landmark list of the century's best thrillers to a bitterly divided Senate confirming a new Attorney General, a surprising jobs report that has the Federal Reserve recalibrating, and a summer weekend forecast that reads like a weather sampler plate. We'll also talk Ted Lasso's return, Spider-Man's box office triumph, Travis Barker's survival story, John Carpenter's new nightmare, and a whole lot more. Let's dive in. We begin with the story that frames this week's edition. My colleagues at the Book Review published their list of the 50 best thrillers of the 21st century, and I've asked Tina Jordan, the editor of the Book Review, to walk us through it. Tina, take it away. Tina Jordan writes, I'm more or less addicted to thrillers. And I've always been this way. I was one of those kids who lived for Encyclopedia Brown books, and firmly believed it was cheating to skip ahead to the last page for the solution. I plowed through all the yellow-spine Nancy Drews I could find. Then, when I was in 6th grade, my teacher began reading Agatha Christie's Cat Among the Pigeons to the class every day after lunch. Was it appropriate for a bunch of 12-year-olds, given the number of people in the novel who were coshed, bludgeoned and shot? Possibly not. But I was hooked. I asked my mother to drive me to the Emily Fowler Public Library and promptly checked out as many Christies as I could carry. From there I moved on to Sherlock Holmes, The Turn of the Screw and Margaret Miller's novels. Now, as a grown-up who works at the New York Times Book Review, I'm immersed in exciting projects all the time. But none was as much fun for me as the list we published this week of the 50 best thrillers of the 21st century. They're still the books I turn to when I want to relax and escape. Sometimes I want to play a mental chess game by picking up a good mystery or police procedural, trying to match wits with a detective. One of my all-time favorites made our list, Tana French's Broken Harbor at number 20, which is not just the story of a murder investigation, but also a devastating day-by-day portrait of a man's descent into mental illness after Ireland's 2008 financial crisis. If someone tells me they don't read thrillers, I hand them a French novel. When I'm not in the mood for anything so cerebral, I like to lose myself in the twists and turns of a fast-moving crime novel, the kind that I can finish in one gulp, like S.A. Cosby's Razorblade Tears at number 8, or Oyenkin Braithwaite's Bracing My Sister, The Serial Killer at number 6, which might be the only comic serial killer thriller I've ever read. I'm also a sucker for deeply unnerving bad seed thrillers, the ones where the kids were born evil. There are 3 of them here, all excellent. Lionel Shriver's We Need to Talk About Kevin at number 14, Ashley Audrain's The Push at number 47, and my single favorite book on the list, Defending Jacob at number 30, William Landay's nerve-wracking tale of murder told, in part, through courtroom testimony. The main character, Andy, is certain that his son didn't stab a classmate to death. His wife, remembering the way other children always seem to get badly hurt around Jacob, isn't so sure. We put the 50 thrillers list together by polling hundreds of writers, booksellers, editors, bookstagrammers, and librarians. When we sent them their ballots, we said, hey, let us know if we can publish yours. A surprising number said yes. Those ballots, it turns out, are a rich source of recommendations. I love Jane Harper's atmospheric thrillers, where the settings, desolate, parched stretches of rural Australia, are as important as the characters. When I saw a book on her ballot that I hadn't heard of, Val McDermid's A Place of Execution, I snapped it up. It might be the creepiest police procedural I've ever read, set in a remote English village so cut off from the rest of the world, they might still be worshipping the corn goddess, as the detective says. Now I've ordered William Boyle's Saint of the Narrows Street, since Jordan Harper, whose ice-cold noir novels I particularly enjoy, had it on his ballot. If I pace myself, I can mine these ballots for months. Now, let's turn to the latest news, starting with politics. A bitterly divided Senate narrowly confirmed Todd Blanche as Attorney General on Saturday, elevating President Trump's former defense lawyer who has presided over a Justice Department that has ceded much of its independence to the White House. Blanche, the number 2 official at the department who has served as acting attorney general since his predecessor, Pam Bondi, was fired in April, was confirmed after a bruising battle that centered on concerns about his ability and willingness to rein in Mr. Trump. The vote came down along stark partisan lines, with Republicans largely falling in line despite growing unease about Blanche's record as acting chief. As acting attorney general, Blanche has overseen a department that critics say has increasingly aligned its enforcement priorities with the White House's political interests. The confirmation caps a months-long saga that began when Bondi was dismissed in April, leaving the department in the hands of a loyalist with no prior prosecutorial experience at the federal level. In a rare show of bipartisan urgency, the Senate on Saturday passed a stopgap spending bill to avert a government shutdown at the end of September, in a bipartisan effort to head off a major spending skirmish before the midterm elections. The vote was 90-6, with one senator voting present, to keep federal funding flowing at current levels through December 11 and bar the Trump administration from transferring funds to the Border Patrol, a provision that Democrats had insisted on. The move came more than a month before the spending deadline, reflecting an eagerness in both parties to avoid a messy fight before the midterms. It was unclear whether the agreement, which was negotiated by senators, could pass the House, though lawmakers there are also eager to avoid a shutdown spectacle weeks before voters head to the polls. President Trump cannot continue building the ballroom he planned as a replacement to the East Wing of the White House without explicit approval from Congress, a federal appeals court panel ruled on Friday. The ruling, by judges from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, dealt a blow to Mr. Trump's efforts to press ahead with the project and drew an angry rebuke from the president, who vowed to take the case to the Supreme Court. The appeals court backed a lower court's ruling, and made it likely that the Supreme Court will decide the case. But the decision does not mean construction will halt immediately. The ballroom project, estimated to cost tens of millions of dollars, has been a flashpoint for constitutional questions about executive authority and congressional control over the purse strings. The Trump administration, rebuffed by the Supreme Court in its first attempt to fire Lisa D. Cook, sent the Federal Reserve Governor a letter saying it was considering removing her from the job. In a letter sent on Wednesday, the White House informed Ms. Cook, who serves on the Board of Governors, that it was considering removing her from her position. The letter, which was signed by Dan Scavino, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, gave Ms. Cook 21 days to respond to previous allegations that she had committed mortgage fraud. Ms. Cook has not been charged with any crime, and her allies say the allegations are baseless. The Supreme Court rebuffed Trump's first attempt to fire her last year, ruling that the president lacks unilateral authority to remove a Senate-confirmed Fed governor without cause. This new letter signals a second attempt, potentially setting up another constitutional showdown over the independence of the central bank. A former federal prosecutor in Miami, fired after an influencer surfaced his old blog posts criticizing Trump, is suing the Justice Department to get his job back. Will Rosenzweig joins a growing list of former prosecutors and federal agents who have gone to court to contest the purge of law enforcement deemed disloyal. One day last September, a right-wing influencer named Natalie Winters posted what she billed as an exclusive on social media. A federal prosecutor in Miami overseeing a fraud case against MAGA patriots had once written a blog with comments critical of President Trump. Ms. Winters, who has hundreds of thousands of followers, addressed her message to the accounts of senior officials at the Justice Department. Her demands for the prosecutor, Will Rosenzweig, could not have been clearer. Fire him, her message said. Less than 3 hours later, the department did exactly that. Mr. Rosenzweig's lawsuit argues that his dismissal violated civil service protections and was motivated by political retaliation, not performance. The case is part of a wave of litigation challenging what critics call a systematic effort to politicize the federal law enforcement apparatus. Moving to business news. The labor market posted a modest loss in July, as businesses shed jobs in the face of renewed tariffs and higher costs driven by war in the Middle East. Employers cut 23,000 positions on a seasonally adjusted basis last month, the Labor Department reported on Friday, and the unemployment rate dropped slightly to 4.1% as hundreds of thousands of people left the labor force. The lower-than-expected reading comes after what had appeared to be a spring surge that rapidly faded as the summer brought higher prices and more uncertainty for businesses, even as they avoided layoffs. Hiring in previous months was revised down sharply, painting a picture of a labor market that has shifted into reverse. The data suggests that the resilience seen earlier in the year was more fragile than it appeared, with sectors like manufacturing and transportation bearing the brunt of the pullback. July's jobs report has reduced some of the urgency around the need for the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates, but it has not eliminated the possibility. Officials at the central bank instead appear much more sensitive to how price pressures are evolving, with heightened focus on next week's inflation report. Officials at the Fed have maintained for months that the labor market is not a primary driver of inflation, but that it is instead fueled by surging energy prices because of the war with Iran and other supply-related shocks. July's jobs report, while weak, does not fundamentally alter that calculus. The Fed's next meeting is in September, and policymakers will be parsing every data point between now and then for signs of whether inflation is finally on a sustainable downward path or whether the supply shocks from the Middle East conflict will keep price pressures elevated. Now, around the world. In a video report, Julian E. Barnes, who covers U.S. intelligence agencies, explains how the Trump administration has been looking for a current or former Cuban official to take over the island's government. The administration's search reflects a broader strategy of seeking a managed transition in Havana that would preserve U.S. interests while avoiding the chaos of a sudden collapse. Details remain scarce, but the effort underscores the administration's view that the current Cuban leadership's days are numbered, and that Washington wants a say in what comes next. More than 20 activists who tried to sail to Gaza said Israeli security forces beat, shocked, and abused them after they were captured. Israel denied the accusations. In interviews, more than 20 people who tried to break an Israeli blockade described beatings, electric shocks, and other abuse after being captured. Reporters spoke to 24 people who were detained when Israel intercepted their convoy in May. They also reviewed several activists' medical records and spoke to legal experts about the Israelis' actions. When Arno Mines tried to sail to Gaza in May, Israeli forces intercepted his boat at gunpoint, took him to an Israeli ship and, he said, shoved him into a darkened shipping container. Barefoot and soaked in seawater, Mr. Mines found up to 4 men waiting there to attack him, he said. The activists, from Europe, North America and elsewhere, were part of a convoy attempting to deliver humanitarian aid and challenge Israel's naval blockade of Gaza. Their accounts, if verified, would constitute serious violations of international law governing the treatment of detainees. Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Pakistan signed a mutual defense pact on Friday, committing to collective defense against attacks on any of the 3 nations, Saudi Arabia said, in an agreement that could reshape the strategic layout of the Middle East. The text of the agreement was not made public, making it unclear what the parties' obligations are. But the Pakistani Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the pact stipulates that any armed attack against any one of the 3 states shall be regarded as an attack against them all. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey, who traveled to Riyadh for the signing, hailed the pact as a new era of cooperation. The agreement brings together 2 regional heavyweights, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, whose relations have often been fraught, and adds Pakistan, a nuclear-armed state with deep military ties to both. In a region of volatile rivalries, it was unclear how it would work in practice, but the symbolism of a Sunni majority bloc spanning the Middle East and South Asia is significant. Iran's nuclear program has been slowed by the war, but not destroyed. Experts believe Tehran has enough weapons-grade fuel to quickly develop as many as 10 nuclear bombs. Chief among President Trump's reasons for launching the war in Iran was preventing it from building a nuclear weapon. More than 5 months in, officials and experts say the conflict may have slowed Iran's nuclear program but not stopped it. Because Iran has barred UN inspections of its most sensitive nuclear sites, a key part of any eventual peace deal, the precise fate of its highly enriched nuclear fuel is unknown. And despite strikes on 3 key nuclear sites in 2025 and 2026, Tehran appears to have retained a stockpile of enough near-weapons-grade fuel to rapidly produce multiple weapons if it chose to do so. The assessment complicates any diplomatic off-ramp. Even if a ceasefire were reached, the nuclear infrastructure and knowledge base remain largely intact. Other big stories. With more than half of the island under drought conditions, Puerto Rico has begun rationing water. Starting on Friday, the island's water authority is scheduled to shut off water for rotating 48-hour periods in parts of San Juan and surrounding areas. Across Puerto Rico, residents are being forced to forego showers and house cleaning. A restaurant owner in San Juan collects condensation from an air conditioning unit so customers can use the water to flush toilets. Miles away in the town of Loiza, residents flock to Peter Pabon, who weaves his tanker truck through narrow streets to fill buckets, storage bins, and plastic bottles. Bedridden and sick residents depend on him. "Everyone knows me already, and I know where everyone is," said Mr. Pabon. The crisis is compounded by aging infrastructure. Leaky pipes lose an estimated 60% of treated water before it reaches taps, and a drought that has depleted reservoirs to critical levels. Officials say the rationing could last for months. This weekend's U.S. forecast: extreme heat in the southwest, wildfire smoke in the northwest, and sauna-like conditions in the northeast. Wildfire smoke, heat, and afternoon thunderstorms. It's the dog days of summer in North America. The worst heat is expected out west, where most of the wildfire smoke may be trapped, while the east also swelters and faces a chance of thunderstorms. Forecast data as of Friday morning shows heat index values topping 115 in parts of Arizona and Southern California, while smoke from Canadian and Pacific Northwest fires degrades air quality from Seattle to Minneapolis. In the Northeast, high humidity will push heat indices into the low 100s from Washington to Boston, with scattered strong storms possible each afternoon. Now, the week in culture. The beloved series Ted Lasso returned for its fourth season this week. The last time we were all here talking about Ted Lasso, a bit over 3 years ago, it seemed to be the last time. The show had been intended, loudly and publicly, to have a 3-season arc, over the course of which Ted Lasso, played by Jason Sudeikis, an American college football coach, would travel to England with two principal goals: to fix a subpar Premier League soccer team and to fix himself. This new and somewhat unexpected fourth season begins with a dark screen and a familiar, rhythmic beeping. Is that a heart monitor? A microwave? No, it's a hospital, and Ted is back in Kansas City. But how long will he stay there? The premiere finds Ted working with the Kansas City Current, the NWSL team, in a move that signals the show's deepening commitment to women's soccer. One place to experience the show's warm, fuzzy vibes? The picturesque London suburb of Richmond upon Thames, where influencers and tourists flock to take pictures with a particular park bench. In the West London suburb of Richmond upon Thames, the herd of deer from the Royal Park sometimes stops traffic. Georgian houses with column-framed doorways line leafy streets. Rented rowboats drift on the river. Cricket has been played on the green in the center of town since the 17th century. In more recent years, tourists and influencers have gathered on a paved area by the green to take photos of some unassuming local attractions: a pub, red phone booths and a bench. This area is known locally as Ted Lasso Corner, and it is the site of many big hard moments filmed for the show. The bench, in particular, has become a pilgrimage site for fans wanting to recreate the show's most tender conversations. The show has also driven interest in women's soccer, the fastest-growing sector of the world's most popular sport. When creators of Ted Lasso decided to return after a 2-year hiatus, they could have taken the easy route. With a release date set on the heels of the 2026 FIFA Men's World Cup, America's favorite soccer coach could have returned to AFC Richmond to reclaim the helm of the fictional club's men's team, now competing in the Premier League. Instead, the show's opening episode features the Kansas City Current as a point of inspiration, centering the women's game in a way that feels both organic and deliberate. The NWSL has seen surging attendance and viewership since the show's return was announced, with the Current's home opener drawing a record crowd. More on TV, a Canadian hardware store chain reported a surge in sales of its reusable shopping bags after the heated rivalry star Hudson Williams was spotted carrying one in Toronto. Non-Canadians should know a few things about Canadian Tire, a hardware/department store with roughly 500 locations. Yes, they sell tires, but also hot tubs, marshmallows and holiday-themed porchkeys. They will take your passport photo and renew your driver's license. But ask chronically online fans of the show Heated Rivalry, and they will tell you that the store has one of the hottest fashion accessories of the summer, thanks to the stylish actor Hudson Williams. Mr. Williams, who is from Vancouver, plays the gay hockey player Shane Hollander on Heated Rivalry, a made-in-Canada queer romance series that has developed a fervent global following. After he was photographed carrying a plaid reusable shopping bag, priced under $2, the tote has become a viral fashion accessory. Canadian Tire reported a surge in sales, with the bag selling out at multiple locations and appearing on resale sites at significant markups. The Shards and Sterling Point, two new teen dramas, offer fresh perspectives on class and status, our critic James Poniwazik writes. When it comes to stories of wealth, TV has lately had an excess of excess. It's given us the rapacious billionaires of Succession, the idle rich of The White Lotus, the merely prosperous of The 5-Star Weekend. But one genre was focused on materialism and its discontents long before the current trend, the teen soap. Maybe because adolescence is a time of life attuned to social hierarchy, teen dramas, from Beverly Hills, 90,210 through Euphoria, are often more class-conscious, more aware of the repercussions of having and having not. The Shards and Sterling Point offer different angles on that most status-conscious of genres, the teen drama. For the younger set, a PBS Kids special follows 4 kids from different backgrounds on their first day of kindergarten. A new animated special, The Day You Begin, based on the best-selling picture book by Jacqueline Woodson, emphasizes the richness that diversity brings to a community. The special adapts Woodson's lyrical text about the courage it takes to show up as yourself in a new place, and the connections that form when we share our stories. Film. Spider-Man defied the superhero slump. Spider-Man: Brand New Day raked in nearly $1 billion in its opening weekend. It's also one of the 5 new movies our critics are talking about this week. The latest installment in this superhero franchise sees Spider-Man, played by Tom Holland, reckoning with the consequences of his actions and is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. From our review, this movie feels as if it's carrying more franchise weight on its shoulders, and that leaves less room for emotional weight. It's more scattered as a result, and while hardcore MCU fans might be pleased, the rest of us are, demonstrably, getting kind of tired of having to do our homework. Nothing can erase the enjoyment of witnessing Holland's performance, which remains winsome and wonderfully kinetic. The box office has Tom Daya to thank for a strong summer. Spider-Man, Brand New Day and The Odyssey assembled Avengers style to power the biggest movie weekend ever for the domestic box office. But beyond the dollar signs, do these films about an angsty superhero and a brooding Greek king have anything in common? Well, Tom Daya, of course. The portmanteau of Tom Holland, 30, and Zendaya, 29, has been scrolled across the internet since they met during the casting process for Spider-Man: Homecoming in 2017. A decade later, Gen Z's fandom for the couple, now married, has grown even stronger. The actors and sweethearts helped draw young audiences to Spider-Man: Brand New Day, which set a record for the largest opening weekend for a non-sequel superhero film. Their combined star power, amplified by a decade of parasocial investment from fans who grew up watching them, turned a strong opening into a historic one. Music. Ahead of the release of a documentary about his life, Travis Barker spoke to Popcast about surviving a plane crash, his famous family and how drumming has anchored him through it all. The drummer Travis Barker is a pop-punk star who's also been an in-demand hip-hop collaborator and go-to anchor for an award show extravaganza. A bashful, relatively low-profile celebrity who married into reality TV's royal family. A former hard-living rocker who has matured into a life of long runs, breathwork and parenting a blended brood of 7. The one constant throughout a career of multi-platinum albums, near tragedy and a streetwear line has been percussion. Barker is one of the signature drummers of the modern era, a ferocious pounder with a versatile ear. Trained in jazz and marching bands during his teenage skater years in Fontana, California, he's brought that skilled dynamism to bands across genres. In the interview, he recounts the 2008 plane crash that killed 4 people and left him with third-degree burns over 65% of his body, the 16 surgeries that followed, and the moment he realized he had to play drums again, not as a career, but as survival. John Carpenter, known for his slasher films, lost interest in directing, but not in horror. His new project, Cathedral, is both a graphic novel and a hard rock album. 2 years ago, an unsettling image came to John Carpenter in his sleep. It consisted of an abandoned cathedral with a pair of elevators inside, capable of plunging passengers to unknowable depths. For most people, that late-night tableau would qualify as a nightmare. But to Carpenter, it was simply an inspiring dream, the latest in a long line of terrifying visions that have marked this filmmaker's career. Carpenter has been a horror titan since 1978, when Halloween, the low-budget thriller he directed, co-wrote and scored, inaugurated the modern slasher genre. He followed that with The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, and They Live, among others, each bearing his distinctive synth-driven scores. But he hasn't directed a feature film since 2010's The Ward. Cathedral marks a new chapter, a multimedia horror experience that fuses his visual imagination with the musical language he helped define. The graphic novel, illustrated by a team of artists under his direction, and the accompanying album, recorded with his longtime collaborators, are designed to be experienced together, a descent into a sonic and visual hellscape that only Carpenter could conceive. Recipe of the Week. I'm Melissa Clark, lemon and thyme grilled chicken breasts. My favorite way to grill chicken breasts is to pound them into cutlets and cook them quickly, so the edges char but the interior stays juicy. And marinating them first with plenty of garlic and other aromatics adds enough flavor to forego a sauce. I do both these things in my recipe for lemon and thyme grilled chicken breasts, which also work beautifully cooked under the broiler. Either way, serve the cutlets on a bed of sliced tomatoes, cucumbers or arugula to soak up all the garlicky drippings. The marinade, lemon zest, lemon juice, garlic, thyme, olive oil, salt and pepper does double duty, tenderizing the meat and infusing it with bright, herbal notes that stand up to the grill's smoke. Pounding the breasts to an even thickness ensures they cook in minutes, not the usual half hour that leaves the outside leather and the inside raw. It's a weeknight miracle, 20 minutes from fridge to plate, with enough leftovers for tomorrow's salad. Real estate. The Hunt. When their son and daughter-in-law left Washington, D.C., for Huntsville, Alabama, a couple followed suit, hoping for a family gathering spot. What did they find? Play our game. The couple, empty nesters drawn to booming Huntsville, navigated a market transformed by defense and aerospace growth. Their search reveals how a mid-sized southern city has become a magnet for relocating families and how much house their budget could actually buy. What you get for $1 million in Italy, a compound with a pool in Ostuni, a partially renovated 16th-century farmhouse near Francavilla Fontana, and a crenellated mini-fortress in Prezzi-Querica. Forming the heel of Italy's boot, the southern Apulia region offers historic homes with architectural delicacies and wide-open spaces. The compound in Ostuni comprises 6 trulli, the traditional conical-shaped houses that dot the Etria Valley landscape, particularly in Alberobello, 12 miles away, where the concentration of the stone huts makes the town a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This property has a consistent rental history for 5 months of the year, according to the listing agent, and is near 2 well-known picturesque towns, Martina Franca, 6 miles away, and Loca Rotondo, 8 miles away. The farmhouse near Francavilla Fontana sits on nearly 12 acres of olive groves and orchards, with original stone walls and vaulted ceilings. The mini-fortress in Prezzi-Querica, with its crenellated tower and fortified walls, dates to the 1500s and has been partially modernized while retaining its defensive character. Pick your favorite: a cottage in Lake Arrowhead, California, a colonial revival in Stonington, Connecticut, and a 2-story house in New Orleans are all on the market for $845,000. Which would you choose? The Lake Arrowhead cottage, in the Palisades section, has lake views and is within walking distance of a coffee shop, a classic hamburger stand and a popular breakfast spot. Lake Arrowhead Village is less than 10 minutes away by car. Size: 1,221 square feet. Price per square foot, $692. The Stonington Colonial Revival offers classic New England symmetry on a quiet street near the village center. The New Orleans 2-story, in a historic neighborhood, has a double gallery and original millwork. 3 very different lives for the same price. Skinny House, a careful renovation helped a couple in Vancouver make the most of their very narrow property. On a lot just 18 feet wide, the architects carved out light-filled spaces, a roof deck, and a sense of spaciousness that belies the footprint. The renovation, which preserved the original structure while inserting a new stairwell and skylights, demonstrates how constraints can drive creative solutions and how a skinny house can live large. Living. Shop like the cool kids, even if you don't live in New York. Our list of the best clothing stores in the city is a window into the front lines of fashion. Style everywhere. Readers wrote in to nominate the best clothing stores not in New York. Here are 25 across the country. When the New York Times published our list of the 50 best clothing stores in America, we knew that, despite our exhaustive efforts, we couldn't include every deserving business in our big country. So we asked readers to submit their favorites and tell us why they love them. We received more than 500 responses, many of them thoughtful, heartfelt, and passionate, which a team of reporters vetted before ultimately selecting 25 stores. These shops share the same DNA as our own favorites: extraordinary customer service, a commitment to the in-person experience, and that special retail magic that inspires and transports shoppers. Time for S'mores. Transform your outdoor space with fire pits, lanterns, and torches to make the most of summer evenings. Our reviewers tested dozens of options to find the best fire pits, lanterns, and torches to conjure the spirit of camp in your own backyard. From propane-powered fire tables that double as coffee tables to wood-burning bowls that throw real heat, from solar lanterns that glow all night to gas torches that line a path with flickering flame, there's a setup for every patio, deck, and yard. Mix and match. Selecting the right tones to go with hardwood floors can be challenging. These tips can help. In our Ask a Design Obsessive column, Talia Maiden tackles a reader's quandary about picking wood for built-in closets that harmonizes with existing hardwood floors. Looking at your floors and samples, I invite you to join me at the drawing board where we can consider some options. I applaud your willingness to mix woods. Many people think that all the wood in their home should have the exact same hue. I disagree. However, to mix successfully, you need to understand undertones. Warm woods with warm woods, cool with cool, but contrast in depth can work beautifully. The column walks through specific pairings: white oak floors with walnut built-ins, maple with cherry, hickory with ash. It's a masterclass in restraint and intention. Advice from Wirecutter. A surprising back-to-school shopping hack. If you find yourself on an IKEA trip this month in search of some college dorm essentials, perhaps don't skip the freezer aisle. Despite its reputation as a destination for affordable furniture, IKEA can also be a great place to stock up on packaged foods. We taste-tested our way through an assortment of the store's offerings and found 18 delicious and easy-to-prepare items worth having on hand, including instant mashed potatoes that don't taste frozen at all. The lineup includes Swedish meatballs, of course, but also salmon fillets, vegetable medleys, lingonberry jam, and a surprisingly good chicken tikka masala. The instant mashed potatoes, made from real potatoes with butter and cream, beat several fresh-made versions in our blind tasting. One more idea to make mealtime easier amid the chaos of back-to-school season: we swear by these excellent kitchen tools that make cooking less annoying: a silicone spatula that actually scrapes the pan clean, a microplane that doesn't clog, a fish spatula thin enough to slide under the most delicate fillet. Leslie Stockton. Now time to play. Here is today's spelling bee. Yesterday's pangram was expending. Take the news quiz to see how well you followed this week's headlines. And here are today's mini crossword, Wordle, crossplay, connections, and strands. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with the Times. That's your briefing. See you tomorrow.